The world in 1941 teetered on the brink of complete upheaval. Europe had been reshaped by the rise of Nazi Germany, a regime whose ambitions reached far beyond the borders of the continent. Adolf Hitler's armies had already swept through France, Belgium, and the Low Countries, leaving entire nations under German control and the rest of Europe in fear. The relentless blitzkrieg tactics demonstrated the devastating efficiency of modern warfare, and the Nazi war machine seemed unstoppable. Yet, across the Atlantic, the United States remained a nation at peace, its people watching the chaos unfold with apprehension and debate over the nation's role in a war that had not yet touched their shores. Neutrality laws attempted to keep America out of direct conflict, yet President Franklin D. Roosevelt understood the dangers that Nazi Germany posed to global stability and democratic nations. Secretly, he began to prepare the nation for the possibility of war, while providing support to Britain and other allies through the Lend-Lease Act. This act allowed the United States to supply war materials, food, and equipment to nations resisting Axis expansion, signaling a quiet but decisive involvement in the struggle abroad. The entry of the United States into the European conflict was not merely a response to distant events, but a recognition that the survival of democracy itself was at stake. The stage was set for a monumental clash between two world powers, a confrontation that would reshape history and define the course of the 20th century. Soldiers, civilians, and leaders alike were thrust into a conflict of unprecedented scale, where strategy, courage, and resilience would determine the fate of nations. This story follows the journey of the United States as it confronted the might of Nazi Germany on the European front, tracing the path from preparation and engagement to ultimate victory. It is a tale of determination, sacrifice, and the unyielding pursuit of freedom against tyranny. The European theater of World War II was a battleground unlike any the world had ever seen, marked by massive operations, decisive battles, and the relentless push of armies across forests, rivers, and cities. From the harrowing landings on the shores of Normandy to the bitter cold and desperate defenses of the Battle of the Bulge, every engagement carried profound significance. Leadership, logistics, and the valor of ordinary soldiers shaped the outcome of campaigns that would determine the future of Europe. In recounting this story, we explore not only the strategy and tactics that define the war, but also the human dimension, the courage, fear, and endurance of those who fought on both sides. The clash between Germany and the United States in Europe was more than a military confrontation. It was a test of values, ideology, and the limits of human resolve. As we journey through these years, the narrative reveals the complexities of global conflict and the monumental effort required to secure peace. This is a story of war, but also a story of humanity, leadership, and the indelible impact of World War II on the modern world. Germany's early victories in Europe seemed unstoppable. Blitzkrieg tactics, rapid armored assaults, and air superiority allowed German forces to overrun Poland, Norway, France, Belgium, and the Netherlands with shocking speed. By 1940, much of Western Europe lay under Nazi control, and Britain stood alone against Hitler's forces. Across the Atlantic, the United States maintained a position of cautious neutrality. Congress passed a series of neutrality acts during the late 1930s to prevent involvement in foreign conflicts, reflecting widespread isolationist sentiment. However, President Franklin D. Roosevelt recognized the threat posed by Nazi expansion and sought ways to aid the Allied powers without committing to war directly. The Lend-Lease Act, passed in March 1941, allowed the United States to provide critical supplies, including tanks, planes, and food, to nations resisting Axis aggression. While American factories produced these materials, U.S. military planners prepared for the inevitable possibility of direct engagement. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor forced the United States into the global conflict. Following this attack, the U.S. declared war on Japan, and shortly afterward, Germany and Italy reciprocated by declaring war on the United States. Suddenly, America faced a two-front war, with the European theater demanding immediate attention. U.S. forces, untested in large-scale European combat, faced the challenge of confronting experienced German divisions, fortified positions, and an enemy that had dominated the continent for years. American generals, including Dwight D. Eisenhower and George S. Patton, took command of forces that would soon land in Europe, tasked with breaking German control and supporting beleaguered Allied nations. Coordination with British forces was essential, and strategic planning began in earnest to prepare for an invasion that could open a Western front against Germany. The U.S. military needed to overcome not only the German army, but also logistical challenges of transporting troops, equipment, and supplies across the Atlantic and into hostile territory. Despite these obstacles, American resolve strengthened. Troops trained rigorously in Britain and North Africa, learning from combat experience, preparing for amphibious assaults, and studying German defenses. Industrial production in the United States surged, producing tanks, aircraft, and weaponry at a pace unmatched by any other nation. The combination of industrial capacity, tactical innovation, and leadership would become critical in shaping the European campaign. By late 1942, U.S. forces began their first significant operations abroad, initially in North Africa, engaging Rommel's Afrika Korps alongside British forces. These early battles were crucial for gaining experience, testing coordination, and building confidence in American capabilities. At the same time, intelligence efforts, strategic deception, and planning for future European invasions were underway, with the ultimate goal of defeating Nazi Germany and liberating occupied nations. The stage was set for a monumental confrontation, with the United States transitioning from a distant supporter to an active, decisive participant in the fight against tyranny in Europe. The early months of U.S. involvement demonstrated both the challenges of modern warfare and the determination of a nation committed to altering the course of history. The North African Campaign marked the first major engagement of American forces against the German military in World War II, providing both a proving ground and a critical stepping stone for the eventual liberation of Europe. Operation Torch, launched in November 1942, represented the United States' first large-scale amphibious assault, landing troops in Morocco and Algeria. The operation required meticulous coordination between American and British forces, as well as careful planning to avoid clashes with Vichy French units in the region. Despite initial resistance, U.S. forces quickly established beachheads and advanced inland, seizing key ports and airfields. The Allies' success in North Africa depended not only on military strategy, but also on overcoming vast logistical challenges, including supplying troops across deserts, maintaining armored vehicles in harsh conditions, and coordinating movements with British commanders who had been fighting the Afrika Korps for months. Erwin Rommel, known as the Desert Fox, commanded the German Afrika Korps with remarkable tactical skill. His ability to exploit speed, terrain, and surprise made German forces formidable opponents, despite being outnumbered and often undersupplied. Rommel's attacks pushed American and British units back at times, testing the resolve of U.S. forces unaccustomed to desert warfare. American soldiers had to adapt quickly to extreme heat, sandstorms, and the psychological strain of fighting in unfamiliar terrain. Tank battles became defining moments of the campaign, with engagements at Kasserine Pass highlighting both the strengths and inexperience of U.S. troops. Though initially facing setbacks, American commanders learned from early mistakes, reorganizing forces, improving communication, and integrating artillery and air support more effectively into combat operations. The North African Campaign was not merely a contest of firepower, it was a test of logistics, leadership, and the ability to operate in coalition warfare. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, serving as the overall commander of Allied forces in North Africa, demonstrated exceptional skill in coordinating multinational forces, balancing British priorities with American objectives. George S. Patton, leading the U.S. Second Corps, injected aggressive tactics and rapid maneuvers into the campaign, building confidence among American troops and shaping future armored warfare strategies. Each victory, no matter how small, contributed to the Allies' strategic goal of securing North Africa as a launching point for an invasion of southern Europe. The campaign also showcased the growing industrial and logistical might of the United States, as supplies, reinforcements, and new equipment continually arrived from across the Atlantic to sustain the offensive. By May 1943, the North African Campaign reached its conclusion with the surrender of Axis forces in Tunisia. The Allies had successfully expelled German and Italian troops from the continent, gaining valuable experience in combined arms operations, coalition coordination, and desert warfare. The campaign allowed American forces to test equipment, refine tactics, and build confidence in leadership, setting the stage for subsequent operations in the Mediterranean. Lessons learned in North Africa directly informed planning for the invasion of Sicily, including the integration of naval, air, and ground operations in complex amphibious assaults. The campaign also demonstrated the importance of mobility, intelligence, and adaptability, showing that even a powerful enemy like Rommel could be outmaneuvered and defeated through persistence, coordination, and innovation. North Africa, therefore, was more than a regional conflict. It was a crucible in which American forces proved their capability to fight in unfamiliar environments and on a global stage. The campaign tested the mettle of soldiers, commanders, and logistical networks alike, establishing a foundation for the eventual push into Italy and the heart of Europe. Success in this theater was both a tactical achievement and a psychological boost, demonstrating to both the Allies and Axis powers that the United States had arrived as a decisive military force. The victories and hard-earned lessons of North Africa became integral to the larger strategy of defeating Nazi Germany, proving that determination, preparation, and collaboration could overcome even the most formidable of opponents. Following the hard-fought victories in North Africa, American and Allied forces turned their attention to Italy, aiming to strike at the soft underbelly of Europe. The invasion of Sicily, known as Operation Husky, began in July 1943 and represented a critical step in opening a new front against Germany while simultaneously removing Italy from the war. American troops, alongside British and Canadian forces, faced the complex task of coordinating amphibious landings across multiple beaches, navigating rough seas, and securing key ports and airfields. Despite challenges posed by German and Italian defenses, the Allies quickly gained a foothold, advancing inland with a combination of strategic planning, armored support, and air superiority. The campaign highlighted the growing experience and confidence of U.S. forces, whose ability to adapt to amphibious operations would prove essential for the larger European campaigns that followed. The fall of Sicily brought significant political consequences. Mussolini's regime weakened as Allied victories demonstrated the vulnerability of Italy, leading to his eventual removal from power in July 1943. Despite this political shift, German forces quickly reinforced Italy, establishing strong defensive positions throughout the peninsula. The Italian campaign became a grueling test of endurance for American and Allied troops. Mountainous terrain, fortified towns, and adverse weather created obstacles that slowed progress and increased casualties. Soldiers contended with rugged landscapes, rivers, and entrenched enemy positions, requiring careful planning, coordination, and relentless determination. Urban combat in towns like Salerno tested both infantry tactics and logistical planning, as streets, buildings, and civilian populations complicated operations. One of the most significant challenges during the Italian campaign was the Battle of Monte Cassino. German forces had fortified this position along the Gustav Line, using the natural high ground to dominate the surrounding valleys. Allied forces, including American, British, and Polish units, faced intense artillery fire, mines, and counterattacks as they attempted to break through. The battle became a symbol of the difficulties inherent in the Italian campaign. Slow, costly, and complex operations against a well-prepared enemy. American troops, learning from previous engagements, improved coordination with artillery and air support, using combined arms tactics to overcome German defenses. The eventual capture of Monte Cassino opened the way toward Rome, demonstrating that persistence, planning, and collaboration could succeed even against formidable fortifications. The Italian campaign also showcased the importance of leadership and initiative. Generals Dwight D. Eisenhower and Mark Clark coordinated operations with Allied commanders, balancing multiple objectives while maintaining momentum. George S. Patton, who had already proven his abilities in North Africa, led aggressive advances through southern Italy, employing rapid maneuvers to outflank German positions and exploit weaknesses. Despite difficult conditions, these operations allowed the Allies to gradually advance northward, tying down significant German forces and relieving pressure on other fronts. The campaign emphasized lessons in logistics, as supplying troops across mountainous terrain required innovation, adaptability, and careful planning to ensure continued effectiveness in combat. By mid-1944, the Italian campaign had succeeded in diverting German resources and opening a path for future Allied operations in Western Europe. While progress was slower than anticipated, the experience gained by American forces proved invaluable for subsequent campaigns, particularly in planning amphibious landings, coordinating multinational forces, and conducting sustained offensives against entrenched defenders. Italy became a proving ground for tactics, leadership, and resilience, demonstrating the challenges of modern warfare beyond open-field battles. The campaign not only advanced strategic objectives, but also strengthened the confidence of U.S. troops, laying the foundation for the monumental operations that would follow in France and beyond. Italy was both a battlefield and a lesson, showing that perseverance, innovation, and cooperation could overcome even the most determined and fortified enemy positions. Setting the stage for the liberation of Europe from Nazi control, the planning for Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Nazi-occupied Western Europe, was one of the most complex military undertakings of World War II. Months of preparation went into selecting a landing site, assembling forces, and ensuring that every detail from logistics to intelligence was meticulously organized. Normandy was ultimately chosen for its combination of strategic advantage and relative surprise, as German commanders anticipated an attack at Pas-de-Calais. Allied forces undertook an extensive deception campaign, including Operation Fortitude, designed to mislead the Germans about the location and timing of the invasion. Inflatable tanks, fake radio transmissions, and double agents created the illusion of an imminent assault far from Normandy, causing the German high command to disperse their forces and weaken their defenses where the Allies would actually strike. On the morning of June 6, 1944, thousands of American, British, and Canadian troops embarked on the largest amphibious operation in history. Soldiers faced the daunting task of crossing the English Channel in rough seas under the cover of darkness, with the element of surprise critical to success. Airborne units were dropped behind enemy lines to secure bridges, disrupt communications, and sow confusion among German defenders. The landings at Omaha and Utah beaches tested American troops in ways no training could fully prepare them for. German fortifications, barbed wire, mines, and machine gun nests awaited the invaders, and soldiers encountered heavy fire almost immediately upon hitting the beaches. Despite these obstacles, small unit leadership, courage, and adaptability allowed the Americans to establish footholds and begin pushing inland. The initial hours of the invasion were marked by chaos and brutal combat. Soldiers crawled through sand and water, often carrying heavy equipment while under relentless artillery and gunfire. Medics worked tirelessly to treat the wounded, and leaders improvised under fire to maintain momentum and cohesion. Air support and naval bombardments softened German defenses, but the determination and resilience of individual soldiers proved decisive in breaking through entrenched positions. The Americans faced enormous losses, yet their advance, inch by inch, demonstrated the effectiveness of rigorous planning, training, and the ability to adapt to unforeseen challenges. As Allied forces moved inland, they encountered a landscape transformed by war. Coastal towns, farmland, and hedgerows created natural obstacles and opportunities for defensive positions. The bocage of Normandy, dense with hedgerows and narrow paths, allowed German forces to mount effective counterattacks and delay the advance. American troops had to learn to coordinate infantry, armor, artillery, and air support in this challenging terrain, refining tactics that would be applied throughout the European campaign. Engineers and logistics units worked behind the front lines to clear obstacles, build bridges, and ensure a continuous flow of supplies, allowing the momentum of the invasion to be maintained. Leadership played a crucial role in the success of D-Day. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, as Supreme Commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force, balanced the immense operational complexity while making critical decisions under uncertainty. Lieutenant General Omar Bradley and General George S. Patton oversaw ground operations with decisive action, pushing forward with aggressive advances once beachheads were secured. The German defense, commanded by Erwin Rommel and Gerd von Rundstedt, proved tenacious, yet the combination of surprise, planning, and sheer determination allowed Allied forces to begin the liberation of occupied France. The success of D-Day established a Western front that would become pivotal in the defeat of Nazi Germany. Securing Normandy allowed the Allies to bring in reinforcements, expand supply lines, and begin the systematic liberation of northern France. The operation demonstrated the importance of combined arms warfare, intelligence, and coordination among multinational forces. The landings at Omaha and Utah beaches, alongside British and Canadian efforts at Gold, Juno, and Sword, were not only a tactical achievement but a symbolic turning point in the war, signaling to occupied Europe that liberation was underway. D-Day tested the limits of human courage, planning, and endurance, laying the foundation for the subsequent campaigns that would ultimately bring Allied forces to the heart of Germany. Following the success of the Normandy landings, Allied forces began a determined push through France, seeking to liberate territory and weaken German control. The campaign was a complex combination of rapid advances, careful planning, and continuous engagement with entrenched German forces. After establishing a secure beachhead, American divisions moved inland, capturing key towns, ports, and transportation hubs. Roads and rail lines became critical targets, as controlling them allowed for faster movement of troops and supplies, ensuring that momentum was maintained. American forces faced fierce resistance at every step, as German units employed delaying tactics, fortified positions, and counterattacks to slow the Allied advance. The liberation of Paris in August 1944 represented both a symbolic and strategic victory for the Allies. American forces, coordinating with French resistance fighters, approached the city from multiple directions, overwhelming German defenders and restoring control to the French government. Civilians greeted U.S. troops with a mixture of joy and relief, celebrating liberation while witnessing the physical and emotional scars left by 4 years of occupation. The capture of Paris also demonstrated the importance of coordination between conventional military operations and local resistance efforts, highlighting the multifaceted nature of modern warfare. Despite the triumphs in northern France, German forces remained a formidable opponent. They regrouped along key defensive lines, prepared to launch counteroffensives, and sought to exploit any weaknesses in the advancing Allied forces. The Battle of the Bulge, beginning in December 1944, represented Germany's final major attempt to turn the tide on the Western Front. German troops launched a surprise attack in the Ardennes forest, taking advantage of poor weather, limited visibility, and the concentration of Allied forces in Belgium and Luxembourg. American units were initially caught off guard, facing severe shortages of supplies, communications difficulties, and harsh winter conditions. The Battle of the Bulge quickly became one of the largest and bloodiest engagements fought by U.S. forces during World War II. Soldiers endured freezing temperatures, snow-covered terrain, and relentless enemy assaults, testing both physical endurance and mental resilience. Key towns, crossroads, and supply depots became critical objectives, with control over each often changing hands multiple times. Leadership at all levels was essential, as commanders such as General George S. Patton orchestrated rapid maneuvers to relieve besieged units, redirect reinforcements, and stabilize the front. Artillery, armor, and air support, once the weather cleared, played decisive roles in turning the battle in favor of the Allies. The resilience and determination of American forces ultimately repelled the German offensive, inflicting heavy losses on the enemy and restoring the momentum of the Allied advance. The battle demonstrated the ability of U.S. troops to endure extreme conditions, adapt to unexpected challenges, and execute complex operations under pressure. The lessons learned during the Ardennes offensive informed future engagements, reinforcing the importance of intelligence, mobility, and coordination in modern warfare. With the Battle of the Bulge concluded, American forces resumed their push into Germany, crossing rivers, securing towns, and weakening German resistance along multiple fronts. The campaign through France and the Ardennes solidified the Western Front as a decisive theater of operations, contributing directly to the collapse of German military power. The combination of strategic planning, effective leadership, and the courage of individual soldiers ensured that each advance brought the Allies closer to the ultimate goal, the defeat of Nazi Germany. By the end of 1944, the U.S. had transformed from a force newly arrived on European soil into a confident, battle-hardened army capable of confronting the enemy across an increasingly shrinking continent. By early 1945, American forces had gained a firm foothold in Western Europe and were preparing for the final push into the heart of Germany. The crossing of the Rhine River represented a critical milestone, as it was one of the last natural barriers protecting the German interior. Operation Plunder, coordinated by American and British forces, combined artillery barrages, airborne drops, and amphibious crossings to establish multiple bridgeheads along the river. The operation required precise coordination, careful timing, and extensive logistical support, as engineers worked to construct pontoon bridges under enemy fire while supply lines ensured the continuous flow of men, vehicles, and ammunition. Overcoming the Rhine was not only a tactical necessity but a symbolic victory, signaling that German defenses were no longer impenetrable. Urban combat became a defining characteristic of the U.S. advance into Germany. Cities such as Cologne and Aachen presented unique challenges, with narrow streets, heavily fortified buildings, and determined German defenders. American infantry, supported by tanks and artillery, engaged in painstaking street-by-street and house-by-house fighting. Every building could hide a sniper or a machine gun nest, making progress slow and costly. Despite these dangers, U.S. forces adapted their tactics, using combined arms strategies, coordinated assaults, and careful reconnaissance to minimize casualties and maintain momentum. Engineers cleared obstacles and mines, allowing mechanized units to advance while medics treated the wounded under constant threat. Throughout this campaign, cooperation with British and other Allied forces proved essential. Coordinated offensives across multiple fronts stretched German resources thin and prevented their forces from concentrating in any single area. Allied air power played a critical role, targeting transportation networks, supply depots, and communication centers, which further weakened German resistance. The combination of ground pressure, air superiority, and logistical efficiency demonstrated the growing sophistication and capability of American forces on European soil. The destruction of German infrastructure accelerated the collapse of the Nazi war machine. Rail lines, bridges, and factories were systematically targeted to prevent the movement of reinforcements and supplies, leaving German units isolated and vulnerable. Civilians in occupied cities endured the consequences of both retreating German forces and advancing Allied troops, as cities bore the scars of battle. Liberating towns often revealed the human cost of the conflict, including civilians caught in the crossfire and the harsh conditions imposed by years of war. American troops, while focused on military objectives, also took on the responsibility of securing liberated areas and providing aid to displaced populations. As U.S. forces advanced further into Germany, they encountered pockets of resistance, but the overall momentum increasingly favored the Allies. The collapse of organized German defense became apparent, with units surrendering in large numbers or retreating in disarray. The coordination between Army, Air Force, and logistical units ensured that American forces could continue pressing forward with minimal interruption, maintaining relentless pressure on German forces. The Rhine crossings and subsequent invasions of German cities highlighted not only the tactical skill of American commanders, but also the endurance and resilience of soldiers facing entrenched enemy positions and a determined adversary. By the spring of 1945, American forces had effectively penetrated into central Germany, setting the stage for the final phase of the European conflict. The campaign across the Rhine and into German territory showcased the effectiveness of modern combined arms warfare, the importance of planning and logistics, and the ability of U.S. forces to adapt to diverse combat environments. Each victory brought the Allies closer to the ultimate goal of ending Nazi rule, demonstrating that determination, coordination, and strategic vision could overcome even the most entrenched and desperate defenses. The push into Germany solidified the Western Front as decisive, preparing the way for the final collapse of Hitler's regime. The final months of the European campaign saw American forces closing in on the heart of Nazi Germany, confronting a nation in collapse yet still capable of fierce resistance. As troops advanced, they encountered scattered German units, desperate to defend territory or delay the inevitable. The Allies moved methodically, liberating towns, securing key transportation routes, and cutting off retreating enemy formations. The cooperation of American, British, and other Allied forces ensured that pressure remained constant on all fronts, preventing German forces from regrouping or mounting effective counteroffensives. Supply lines, communications, and intelligence operations functioned with remarkable efficiency, allowing for a sustained and coordinated advance into Germany's interior. One of the most significant aspects of this final phase was the liberation of concentration camps, where American troops were confronted with the full extent of Nazi atrocities. Soldiers witnessed the devastating conditions endured by prisoners, including starvation, disease, and systematic brutality. The discovery of these camps profoundly impacted the morale and determination of American troops, reinforcing the moral imperative behind their mission. Commanders ensured that liberated civilians received immediate medical care, food, and security, while documenting the horrors for both historical record and legal accountability. The liberation of these camps highlighted the intersection of military operations and humanitarian responsibility, demonstrating the complex nature of modern warfare where combat and moral duty often intersect. The encirclement of German forces in key regions accelerated the collapse of organized resistance. Cities such as Nuremberg, Munich, and Hamburg fell under Allied control, often after intense urban combat that tested the coordination and adaptability of American forces. Civilians, exhausted by years of totalitarian rule and war, greeted liberators with relief and cautious optimism. Military operations were conducted with precision to minimize civilian casualties while ensuring that German forces could not regroup. Leadership at all levels, from generals to squad leaders, was critical in maintaining discipline, momentum, and effectiveness during these final operations. By April and early May 1945, the German command structure had largely disintegrated. Adolf Hitler's death and the subsequent surrender of key units signaled the end of Nazi control. American troops played a decisive role in securing surrender agreements, accepting the capitulation of remaining forces, and stabilizing occupied areas. The collapse of Germany was both a strategic and symbolic moment, marking the culmination of years of relentless effort, sacrifice, and coordination across multiple fronts. The contributions of American soldiers were essential in achieving this outcome, from strategic planning and combat effectiveness to humanitarian efforts and post-conflict stabilization. The fall of Nazi Germany represented the success of a strategy built on preparation, coordination, and relentless determination. The lessons learned during this campaign, including combined arms operations, coalition warfare, and adaptive leadership, became integral to modern military doctrine. The European theater had tested American forces in unprecedented ways, from amphibious assaults and urban combat to logistical challenges and moral responsibility. By the conclusion of these operations, the United States had established itself as a decisive power capable of executing large-scale military campaigns with efficiency, skill, and moral purpose. The defeat of Germany was not merely a military victory. It was the culmination of years of strategic foresight, sacrifice, and the unwavering commitment of millions of soldiers to the liberation of Europe and the restoration of peace. With the surrender of Germany in May 1945, the European conflict of World War II had officially ended, but the consequences of the war extended far beyond the battlefield. American forces, alongside their Allied partners, assumed responsibilities that went beyond combat, including stabilizing occupied territories, providing humanitarian aid, and overseeing the reconstruction of devastated regions. Cities lay in ruins from relentless bombing campaigns and urban combat, leaving millions of civilians homeless and struggling to survive. Displaced persons, prisoners of war, and liberated concentration camp survivors required immediate assistance, and the U.S. military played a central role in coordinating relief efforts while maintaining order. The logistical and administrative challenges of occupation demonstrated that victory in war extended beyond defeating enemy forces to restoring governance, infrastructure, and essential services. The post-war period also involved holding accountable those responsible for crimes committed during the conflict. The Nuremberg trials, conducted with significant participation from the United States, brought Nazi leaders to justice for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and acts of aggression. These trials established important precedents in international law, emphasizing accountability, the protection of human rights, and the principle that leaders could be held responsible for actions taken during wartime. U.S. involvement in these proceedings reflected both a moral and legal commitment to ensuring that the horrors witnessed across Europe would not go unpunished, reinforcing the ideals for which Allied forces had fought. Beyond the immediate humanitarian and legal concerns, the European theater had profound geopolitical implications. The war's conclusion left Germany divided and occupied, with the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union each administering zones of control. These arrangements, coupled with ideological differences between the United States and the Soviet Union, set the stage for the emerging Cold War. The presence of U.S. forces in Europe, the rebuilding of Western economies through programs such as the Marshall Plan, and the establishment of military and political alliances all contributed to reshaping the global balance of power. The United States emerged not only as a decisive military victor, but also as a central actor in shaping the post-war world order. The economic and social consequences of the war were immense. European infrastructure, industry, and agriculture required reconstruction, and millions of people faced displacement, poverty, and the psychological scars of prolonged conflict. American economic and logistical support proved essential in stabilizing Western Europe, facilitating recovery and preventing political instability that could have undermined long-term peace. Simultaneously, the war had transformed American society, accelerating industrial production, technological advancement, and the integration of diverse populations into military and labor efforts. Lessons in leadership, strategy, and the human cost of war left an enduring impact on military doctrine, policymaking, and international relations. And ultimately, the aftermath of World War II in Europe demonstrated the far-reaching effects of military victory. American involvement had ensured not only the defeat of Nazi Germany, but also the stabilization and rebuilding of a continent in ruins. From humanitarian assistance and urban reconstruction to trials for war crimes and geopolitical reorganization, the United States played a central role in shaping post-war Europe. The conflict underscored the importance of preparation, strategy, and moral purpose in warfare, and its lessons continued to influence international relations, military planning, and the global balance of power for decades to come. The sacrifices, decisions, and actions of American forces left an indelible mark on history, establishing the United States as a leading power in both military and political spheres. The defeat of Nazi Germany marked the culmination of years of intense conflict, strategic planning, and extraordinary human effort on the European front. American forces had transitioned from a nation initially reluctant to enter the war into a decisive power capable of executing complex, large-scale military operations across an entire continent. From the beaches of Normandy to the cities of central Germany, U.S. troops demonstrated courage, resilience, and adaptability in the face of entrenched enemy forces, harsh terrain, and extreme conditions. The sacrifices made by countless soldiers, as well as the leadership of commanders like Eisenhower, Patton, and Bradley, ensured that the momentum of the Allied advance remained unbroken and ultimately led to victory. Beyond the battlefield, the European campaign underscored the moral and humanitarian responsibilities of warfare. American forces not only defeated a formidable enemy, but also liberated millions of civilians, exposed the horrors of concentration camps, and helped lay the foundations for post-war reconstruction. The collaboration with allied nations, the effective integration of logistics, intelligence, and air-ground coordination, and the lessons learned from every engagement shaped modern military strategy and established enduring standards of leadership. The victory in Europe was not merely a military achievement. It was a testament to the determination, unity, and vision of those committed to ending tyranny. It left a lasting legacy, reshaping international relations, and securing a future in which the lessons of World War II would continue to inform history, strategy, and the pursuit of peace.